All right, let's dive deep into one of the most profoundly unsettling transformations in all of literature, the surreal waking nightmare of Gregor Samsa. We're not just talking about a man who turns into an insect here. No, this is a journey into absolute isolation, into a kind of casual cruelty that's almost hard to believe, and into the sheer horror of being seen as useless by the very people who are supposed to love you the most.
And just like that, with that single sentence, Kafka throws us and Gregor headfirst into a world that is completely, irrevocably shattered. There's no build-up, no warning, no explanation. It's just this, an abrupt, bizarre, and frankly horrifying new reality. The real terror of the story, you see, it doesn't start with a scream. It starts with this quiet, almost matter-of-fact acceptance of something completely impossible.
You know, what's so jarring about this moment is Gregor's own reaction. He doesn't panic, he doesn't scream his head off. His first thoughts are just shockingly mundane. He's a traveling salesman, right? So his biggest worry is that he's late for work. His mind is still totally human, completely trapped in the day-to-day anxieties about his job and his family's debt, all while his body has become something utterly alien.
So the very first thing he registers about his new form is his back. It's hard, unyielding, like a shell of armor. He tries to roll onto his right side, his favorite way to sleep, but he can't. He just kind of rocks back and forth, completely helpless. Think about that. The most basic comfort, the simple act of turning over in his own bed, is now totally impossible. This is not a dream. This is the beginning of a physical prison.
Then he manages to lift his head a little bit and he gets a good look at his own stomach. It's brown, it's slightly domed, and it's divided by these arched, stiff sections. And his quilt, his familiar bedding, it can barely even cover him anymore. It's just sitting there perched on top of this grotesque new abdomen, ready to slide off at any moment. This is it. This is his first real visual confirmation of his monstrous new shape.
And then he sees the legs. Not two, oh no, so many legs. And in his own words, they're pitifully thin compared to the massive bulk of his new body. And they're just waving around helplessly, completely beyond his control. This isn't just a transformation, it's a total, absolute loss of control over his own physical self. The image is it's both pathetic and deeply, deeply unnerving.
So for now, Gregor is trapped. He's trapped inside this new body, sure, but he's also trapped inside his room. The physical horror is his and his alone. But that is about to change. You can hear his family starting to stir. The outside world is literally about to come knocking, and the real nightmare, the social one, is just about to begin.
And you can just feel the tension ratcheting up. His mother calls to him, she's worried. He tries to answer her, but what comes out is this painful animal squeaking that he can't control. Then his father knocks, then his sister, and finally, to make matters so much worse, the chief clerk from his office shows up. Gregor, totally desperate to explain himself, goes through this immense struggle just to get out of bed and turn the key in the lock with his mouth.
And this moment, right here, it captures the disconnect perfectly. Before they even lay eyes on him, the chief clerk hears Gregor's attempt to speak and just instantly dismisses it. He doesn't hear a man who's sick or in trouble, he just hears an animal. Gregor's humanity is already being stripped away. His every attempt to communicate is now meaningless because of the sound of his new voice.
The moment he finally gets that door open, it is catastrophic. The chief clerk, who represents the whole professional world, he just bolts in absolute terror. His mother, the one who should be a source of care, she just collapses in a heap on the floor. But his father's reaction is different. It's not just fear, it's hostility. He actually clenches his fists, and he realizes he's not seeing his son in some tragic mess. He's seeing an enemy, an intruder in his own home.
And that hostility doesn't just stay a look, it immediately turns into violence. His own father, making these hissing noises, uses a stick and a newspaper to herd Gregor back like he's some kind of stray animal. There's no attempt to understand, just brute force. When Gregor's new body gets stuck in the doorway, he's too wide to fit through, his father doesn't help him. No. He delivers this brutal shove that sends Gregor flying, bleeding, into the room that will now officially become his prison cell. The door is slammed shut, and just like that, the separation is complete.
Time passes. A grim little routine starts to set in. But the next major confrontation between Gregor and his father, this marks the point of no return.
It's an act of violence so awful, so significant, that it becomes the physical manifestation of his family's ultimate rejection of him.
It happens during another chaotic scene where Gregor accidentally frightens his mother. His father comes home just enraged. He sees Gregor as the source of all their problems. He walks over to the fruit bowl on the sideboard, fills his pockets with apples, and with this cold, terrifying determination, he begins to throw them at his son.
And the choice of weapon here is just so deeply, darkly symbolic. An apple, right? A symbol of home, of nourishment, is turned into a projectile, a weapon. His father is hurling them with absolute fury. One of them glances off, but another one, it hits him squarely, and it lodges deep into the flesh of his armor-like back. The pain is described as just incredible, stunning Gregor into paralysis.
And the apple, it just stays there. It becomes a permanent part of him, a visible, rotting reminder of his father's judgment. No one in the family has the courage, or maybe the compassion, to even try to take it out. It's just left there to fester, a physical symbol of how Gregor himself is going to be left to decay in his room. You see, that apple is the real turning point. From this moment on, Gregor's slow decline just picks up speed. The injury severely limits his ability to move, and it becomes a true invalid. His entire life shrinks down to the four walls of his room, an existence that's defined by neglect, by filth, and by the slow, painful process of being completely forgotten. You can really see the neglect happen in stages. I mean, at first, his sister, Greet, she shows a little bit of compassion. She brings him scraps of rotten food to see what his new tastes are. But pretty soon, that little bit of care just evaporates. His room becomes a dumping ground for all the family's junk. Then they hire a cleaner who isn't disgusted by him, but instead treats him with this crude, mocking cruelty. And then, finally, Greet just gives up entirely, abandoning her duties, leaving the room and Gregor to just succumb to the filth. The final act, it's actually set in motion by music. Greta is playing the violin for three tenants the family has taken in. And Gregor, who is still capable of feeling beauty, is just captivated by the sound. He slowly, painfully crawls out of his room because he wants to show her how much he appreciates it. But his appearance, of course, causes total chaos. It horrifies the tenants, and they immediately give notice that they're leaving.
And this is the moment his sister, his last real connection to the family, delivers the final, chilling verdict. In this speech to her father, she severs every last tie. He is no longer Gregor. He is not even a he anymore. He's an it, a monster, an unbearable burden that they have to dispose of if the family wants to survive.
And Gregor, huddled in the corner of the room, he hears and understands every single word. He hears his own death sentence being passed, and in one final, absolutely heartbreaking act of love for a family that clearly no longer loves him, he agrees with them. He accepts that he has to disappear.
And so he does. He makes his way back to his room one last time. As the clock strikes 3 in the morning, he thinks about his family with, it says, love and emotion. His head sinks to the floor, and he breathes his last. His death is quiet, it's lonely, and it happens in complete and total darkness.
The discovery of his body is just as cruel as his life had become. The cleaner just announces it crudely, poking his corpse with a broom. His mother weeps, sure, but his father's reaction it's the most disturbing of all. He simply crosses himself and gives thanks to God. For him, his own son's death is not a tragedy. It's a blessing. It is a divine relief.
With Gregor gone, the burden is lifted. That very same day, the family leaves the apartment together for the first time in months. They take a tram out of the city into the warm sunshine. All the darkness that Gregor represented has been expelled from their lives, and they immediately start talking about their bright, new, unburdened future. And this is the story's final, brutal twist of the knife. As they're watching their daughter stretch in the sun, they don't see a grieving sister. They see a beautiful young woman who is now marriageable. Gregor's sacrifice, his lonely decay, and his miserable death has literally paved the way for their renewal. His dehumanization has, in this really terrifying way, allowed them to reclaim their own futures. And in the end, that's what we're left with. Gregor Samsa was the family's breadwinner. He worked a job he hated to support all of them. But the very moment he couldn't do that anymore, the moment he became a burden instead of a provider, their love, their patience, and eventually, even their recognition of his humanity, it all just vanished. It's a deeply disturbing question that sits right at the dark heart of this masterpiece.